Brooke Romney is a writer, speaker, and educator on parenting modern teens. She is a regular guest on television segments and podcasts and has been published in local and national news sources such as the Washington Post. Brooke is the author of the best-selling parenting book, 52 Modern Manners for Today's Teens, and a seasoned parenting coach helping families with practical methods for building connection. Thank you so much, Brooke, for talking to me today.
Thank you for having me, Aniko.
So, my first question is about parent sentiment. So, according to the most recent Pew poll on this topic, two-thirds of parents are saying that parenting is harder today than it was 20 years ago. And many are citing technologies like social media or smartphones as one of the reasons. How do you see parents struggling with issues surrounding technology in your work?
Yeah, I tend to agree with the sentiment of parents saying it's harder, especially because when you ask parents what's harder, it almost always revolves around technology. And I think a lot of parents feel like if they could get rid of technology, then a lot of their parenting struggles would be different. I think one of the hardest things about this is technology is prevalent in our world. So the idea of, living off the grid doesn't seem realistic to most families, even off the grid of a cell phone or something like that seems too far fetched for most people who are living in a modern world. So I think there's a real rub between what parents would love to do and what feels practical for them. I also think that as parents decide to do things a specific way that works for their family, they feel increasing pressure from other parents, from schools, from communities who are starting to require, connectedness of our kids and our teenagers, and consistent access to them, whether that's through sports teams or, remind apps, submitting all of your work through Canvas or, a school website that is better access from your phone. Those things just make it really hard. Add to that a parent's own pull to be on social media because that's where they feel connected, where they get their information, and them being able to have hard stops for themselves. And it just becomes really, really complicated.
Yeah, for sure. I think what you mentioned about kind of you framed it as like the pressure from schools to, join all these apps and tools and things like that. I mean, one of the pros of tech is the executive functioning aspect of it, right? But
Yes.
you also spoke about, things like social media, like when those things that are stickier and, more distracting and kind of the I guess the sugar compared to the vegetables, right, are on the same platform. It just makes it so hard, not only for the parents, but especially for the teens who have a hard time with this. Anyway, these are built skills that they're building anyway. How, right? Is that kind of
Yes.
what
Yes.
you're saying too?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and even, like you said, they're all wrapped into this one device and while it would be wonderful if we had amazing controls of these devices and if we had, like a global idea of what is appropriate and good for a 10-year-old and then a 12-year-old, things like that, we just don't have that. And so these devices, even sometimes well-controlled ones, can become something that's much more of a hindrance than a tool on a young teenage brain.
For sure. I mean, it's a retrofit at the end of the day,
Mhm.
right? Like these products are designed really for grown-ups in mind, and
Right.
we put the parent controls and things on as a retrofit. But kids are smart. First of all, they can get around them. Second of all, they're complicated. It's hard
Yep.
for parents to manage these things. It's overwhelming. So I think what we talk about a lot with a lot of our experts is it's really just not a fair fight, right? It's one child, one parent against this huge system, and it's overwhelming, I think, is the word I keep coming back to. So let's talk about the parent-teen connection, which I know is a huge part of your work as a coach and a writer, and everything else you do. So how does modern screen technology affect that parent-teen connection?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think it's two-sided. The first side is parents. Parents are much less available and engaged just by nature of the busy world that we live in. Um, I think we are just as distracted as our kids are. We're often just as interested in what is online, prioritizing that over what is directly in front of us. And I think that, like you said, it's a not a fair fight, and it's even not a fair fight for an adult because these algorithms and the high technology that they use, they're getting our eyeballs, they're getting our attention. And so it takes really deliberate parenting to be able to put those things away that are giving us those dopamine hits that are feeling so good and that are feeling so fun in effort in order to do the harder connective things. Online, you might post a picture of your vacation and everybody tells you how fun it is and how great you look and that feels really good. You may ask your child if he wants to play a game with you and he might say, "I don't even like to play games. Why are you making me play a game?" Those two things don't feel very fair when you're comparing the two. Um, but the effort with one is going to yield high results. And the effort with the other really doesn't have a lasting effect on us. And so I think parents are struggling to make that in-person connection a priority. And then on the other side, we are fighting that battle for the attention of our kids when we are not nearly as interesting as Fortnite. We are not nearly as cool as the friends they're connecting with on social media. We know way less than the teenage influencer that they've put all their eggs in their basket. And really like on a surface competition, we often lose out to what looks more exciting in the moment for them. And so I think it's going to take a lot of deliberate action on the part of parents and kids to be able to come back and feel connected again.
For sure. I mean, you touch on this a lot, but everything that we see on our devices is delivering lots and lots of dopamine rewards, right? And that
Right.
feels really good on the brain, and it's very passive. They're very easy to get, right? So I mean, let's stay with teens because I know that's your lane. You mentioned something about like playing a game together in person. Well, I mean, that is going to feel good. It's going to give you dopamine, but you're going to have to work a lot harder, to get that.
Right.
Where when you're using the device, it's just right there. It's easy. It's potent. So I think what you're talking about working hard is just so true and exhausting, on top of
Exactly.
everything else we've talked about, being a busy
Yeah.
parent. And one of the other things we talk a lot about is the demands of parenting. We started this conversation with saying parenting is harder. It actually really is, because parents are expected not only to be good parents and be super engaged with their kids, but they're expected to work. They're expected to be super involved in their kids' lives, go to all their sporting events, whatever it is. There's definitely a societal change in what we expect from parents. I think I'm going to misquote this, but there was a quote somewhere or a statistic where the average parent, doesn't matter mom or dad, spends significantly more time with their kids than the like 50 stay-at-home housewife. There's just a huge shift in the way that in the expectations of parents, and
Yeah.
it's hard. It's really, really hard. So
Well, and I
um,
think to go along with that idea, one of the issues is we know that if we leave our kids to their own devices, chances are they're going to be on a device.
yeah,
Where 40 years ago, if you left your kids to their own devices, they would probably go outside or find a friend or build something or grab a book. There wasn't that much information to consume. And so I think that that has made parents feel like they need to be more involved. They need to be managing things a little bit better, a little more hands-on. Plus, what our kids are exposed to is much scarier than what they used to be exposed to, on the corner riding a bike. And
yeah.
so staying involved, making sure we're having those conversations, we can't really let them go, but then at the same time having that free play and their time to figure themselves out and figure things out with friends without a helicopter parent figuring it all out for them. All those things are still such important skills, so finding that balance is just really tricky today.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about that a little bit more. So, how can families create a healthy relationship with technology in their households?
it's an interesting question because by no means are we a perfect family at it, but we are willing to work and try and see what's working. And one of the things that I'm trying to do this year is to be able to have time away from my phone in the evenings when I'm with my family. I think another challenge is many of us work online, which means that our work never ends. We never shut the door and lock our office and transition to just a fully at home parent.
Yeah.
But making sure that we're doing that still so that we have a break, which is great for us, and then time to devote to doing other things. But as I decided to make that change, one of the things that I thought was really interesting is, and this goes along with habits, but you can't change a habit unless you replace it with something. So
Yeah.
just saying, I'm going to put my phone away, that's a really nice idea. But if your family is very used to sitting on your devices all together, or everybody going into their own rooms and doing their devices, saying we're putting our devices away won't necessarily be effective. So it's, what are we going to do instead? What will we do together? What is something that's realistic to say? We're going to play a game every night. We're going to watch Monday Night Football together. Um, we are going to go outside for a walk. We're going to have the whole family support each other in their sporting event. So, the three kids don't get to stay home when the one is doing something. We're all coming along and we're all going to go support each other. So I think as parents, making realistic plans for what that phone free time looks like, especially if you've become very used to it. Um, One of the things that has was hard for our kids at times was putting the phones away early enough in the night before bed and
Mhm.
then winding down with a book. That is one of the things that has paid probably the most dividends in my parenting, was starting that habit very young. Is reading happens every night, and
Yeah.
we read for pleasure, we read for fun, we look forward to the books that we're reading, and really like doing my best to find books that are engaging for my kids so that they look forward to that. But all of us being able to put our devices away early on, and for them watching mom and dad do the same thing. So it's not
Mhm.
they have to read and we get to scroll, but we're all reading. We're talking about the books we're reading. We're recommending books to each other. That's something that can be very exciting, even if it feels a little old school. But making those deliberate choices to find something to fill what used to be a smartphone or a screen time together. Um, Another thing that has worked really well, and I know every family is different, but putting parameters around when video games are available. And it's different for different ages. There's more freedom as kids get a little older, as long as they're handling their responsibilities. But talking about, maybe video games happen on the weekend, or maybe video games happen from 7 to 8 p.m. at night if everything's finished. Sometimes, parents shy away from having parameters and rules, but I think it helps kids be able to develop some self-control. Seeing, wow, okay, I got to get my homework done. I'm going to work really hard because I would like some free time. That we're not using video games and phones to zone out and exit life. We're using them to maybe wind down because that's how we enjoy winding down. And I think there's a big difference between numbing ourselves and doing something we enjoy for a reasonable amount of time.
There's so many good tips in there. One of the things that stands out when you were talking is I heard a lot of boundaries, right?
Yeah.
Talk about boundaries and parents setting them. And I agree with you. I think a lot of parents are sort of afraid, to set boundaries, modern parents, but kids like them, they need
Yes.
that leadership. They want that leadership, like even into the teen years. That's something that they're looking for. But you also mentioned modeling, right? You also have
Right.
to model that behavior you want to see, right? So you can't just say, okay, enough time on the phone, and then you go be on your phone or do whatever you're doing. Like engaging as a family not only is great for connection, which, to
Right.
bring us back to that, but, um, teens are smart. You can't
Right.
do as I say, not as I do after a certain age, right?
Right.
And this works for younger kids too. They will see what you're doing on it and what your relationship is with the device. And they are going to look at that, even if it doesn't feel that way as teenagers, right? Even though they're individualizing and just so much more mature, they're still looking at what you're doing. So I think those are my
Yeah.
two favorite things about what you talked about.
Well, and I think, one of the things as parents, sometimes we wanna give a boundary and then have our kids say, "Thanks so much, mom, that's a great idea." And we need to get rid of that idea. They're never going to do that. Teens are working on differentiation. They need something to push against. And so when we give that boundary 100% of the time, they're probably gonna say, "That's so stupid. Why are you making me do this?" But
Yep.
then they will jump on board because they have to and see the benefits later. Um, just as a side note, I have an older son who is 21, and I have seen him kind of, he was always fighting against the boundaries that we put in place. And as he is his own person now, it's been so fun to see him choose to put away the cell phone, to
Yeah,
choose to take breaks from social media, to choose to read, to choose to engage with the people in his life because that's what he saw. So even though he may have hated it in the teenage moment, he saw the benefits of it once he could choose to do that on his own.
for
If he'd
sure.
never seen that, I don't know that he would have even known it was an option.
No, for sure. That is so true. And I've heard this time and time again. It's anecdotal, but just certain slow tech celebrities, for example, that have spoken out. I think it was Jennifer Garner
Yeah,
recently. She said that her older kids are now thanking her, for slowing them down, for keeping them off social media longer, right? And it's a fight for sure. I mean, you're not going to be their friend, but I have yet to hear, anecdotally at least, of a kid with boundaries that grows up saying, "Gosh, I'm really upset that, my mom didn't let me do whatever they want." They really do appreciate them. And like you said, eventually it'll pay off, even though it's hard. So, okay. So we talked about reading. I know reading is like a huge passion for you, reading, writing. So there was a survey just before the pandemic by the National Assessment of Educational Progress, which showed that percentages of adolescents who said they read daily for fun dropped by double digits since 1984. So, I mean, we're all seeing this around us, but the numbers are supporting this too. So, you touched on this a little bit, but how can parents foster a love for reading given the competition of devices that we've already spoken so much about?
Yeah, I like to say that without a lot of oversight and boundaries, kids will stop reading as soon as they get a smartphone. And
Yeah.
if anecdotally, you can watch that in the lives of kids and teenagers and watch it happen. So I think it's something for me. There's a few like hills worth fighting for, and that is one of them for me. Reading is so important for a kid's success, not just in school, but in life, being able to understand, take in information, analyze it, synthesize it. It gives them confidence when they're a good reader. Test scores go up in every area, even math. So for me, it's something that is worth doing. And I touched on it before, but putting devices away at a certain time, making sure that reading is part of a family routine, throwing on an audiobook in the car instead of everybody putting in their own headphones, listening to something together. For one, it's really fun. And for two, it gives you a shared experience, common language, something to connect over. I love doing that. Having your kids watch you read and talk about books like they're fun. Um, I'm a huge advocate of reading at home being enjoyable. So, no, oh, that book is not quite at your reading level. Why are you reading a graphic novel? Helping
Yeah.
them understand that reading should be something you look forward to, just like you look forward to playing video games, especially for teenagers. They're going to have to read books in school that maybe they're not as excited about, allowing them some of that space and time to be able to read. Being on a long car trip, requiring people to turn screens off. If you're driving for 12 hours, it's awesome to have them read for an hour or two, being active at the library, looking forward to new books. There's so many great accounts that share great books. Every month I share one that teenagers like and one that like a early teen, preteen would like. Um, to me, this is something that's worth it as a parent. If you don't love to read, I suggest you look out for some great books. There are so many good books that I think would make you love reading too. It's a great way to switch out some of that cell phone time, screen time for a book. And your example makes a huge difference to your kids.
Yeah, again, modeling, doing it together whenever you can. And I love what you said about it doesn't matter what they're reading.
Yeah.
My son loves graphic novels too. Um, he's reading,
Yeah.
he'll read the dense stuff too, and
Yeah.
he'll like you said, he'll be required to read it at school. But when he reads for fun, it doesn't matter, as
Yeah.
long as you're engaged, and it's the same process. And I like that you touched on all the cognitive benefits too. I mean, it might seem like common knowledge, but I don't think people think about that, like how that it's actually healthy for your brain and all the great things that it does academically and all that. So it's really, again, worth the effort, more effort, but worth it for so many ways. And, now we've done this in my house too, where we really foster a love of reading. My son will now do it for hours, on his
Yeah.
own, and he's
Yeah.
10. So I hope it will continue. I'm sure it will into the teen years. Okay, so my last question is, given I know you do so many great tips in your book and online and everything else about modern manners. So, what are your favorite modern manners for teens? And let's stay in line with cell phone use.
Oh, okay. Let's do that. So, the one that always comes to mind for me right away is nothing online is private. This is a manner that if teens understood, they could save themselves a lot of heartache. Nothing online is private. And I think in the manner it says something like, if you wouldn't be comfortable with your parents, your friends' parents, your school teacher, your future, boss reading what you've written or posted, don't post it.
Yeah.
Talking about if you're not comfortable with saying it in person, don't say it online, don't say it through a text. And this is I think this is a manner that we can reiterate over and over and over to our kids from the time they get their first, maybe not so smartphone or a little watch that communicates, all the way to the time when they're worried about their digital footprint. And so I think that is one of my favorite manners for online. There's quite a few other ones, things like, not having your phone out and doing speakerphone or watching something, like throw the headphones in if you're in a public place. Um, at a movie theater or at a play, you're not texting, you're not watching something, you are present. You don't want to interfere with the experience other people are having with wherever you're at. There's one about replying. Um, when an adult texts you, reply. I'm not saying you have to be connected to your phone all the time and reply immediately, but by the end of the night, when someone texts you, shoot them a quick text back, especially if it's something that's time sensitive or somebody's looking to get a count on who's coming or what someone's bringing. Those things need to be replied to. Or if somebody asks you to babysit, and whether you want to or not, just reply. Those are important. I think there's a manner about not leaving just one person out. There's a little bit of a thing that happens with teenagers where they'll start a new group text and leave one person off it.
Mm.
It's cruel. And so figuring out, whether it's in person or online, how to be inclusive and help people feel connected and included instead of excluded and alone. So there's a lot of great technology manners between the Modern Manners for Teens Volume 1 and 2. In the Modern Manners for Kids book, we talk about what to do when you see something online that you don't want to see or that doesn't feel right. That's
Mhm.
really important. I included that manner because I never want kids to feel shame about what's coming to them online. The manner talks about how the internet doesn't always protect kids. And so you never have to be embarrassed. It's not your fault that something came onto the screen, but it's important that you tell an adult and shut it down. And then adults can help protect you online. Um, so there's a lot of really great technology manners that open up conversations between parents and kids. And a lot of times I think our kids and our teens aren't trying to do things wrong. They just don't know how to do things right.
Yeah.
And that was one of the most important things when I wrote this book was I didn't want teens or kids to feel shame about not knowing how to navigate our modern world because no one had taught them yet. And I wanted them to feel empowered and successful. And I wanted parents to have tools to start those conversations that could help their kids and teens feel empowered and successful.
Yeah, those are so many good things there. One of the things that we talk to our parents a lot about when we do parent ed is screen etiquette, because I mean, it doesn't feel this way because it feels like we've had devices forever, but it's still really a brand new societal issue. And even grown-ups don't have good screen etiquette sometimes, right? So I don't know
So
how we
true.
would expect to hand this, device that does so everything basically to a child who's still learning, or a teenager even, and just expect that they're going to know what to do. I mean, you really do have to spell out all these things you mentioned, and more, to them. And I love the proactive approach, as opposed to like, I feel like sometimes kids get in trouble online and then we go back and have to figure it out. But if you spell it out for them in advance and give them the etiquette in advance, I think it just sets them up for success, right? Because this is complicated. It's not a
Yeah.
simple thing, knowing how to navigate this supercomputer in your pocket, basically. So,
And the
yeah,
hard thing is when they make some of those mistakes, they can't go back. And
yeah,
that's the scary thing about technology
that's
is
right.
you wish you could erase it, but if you wait until the problem happens, sometimes it's too late to repair because our world isn't all that forgiving online. And so
Right.
really giving them the tools, and then if they choose to do something differently, I think the good part about that is I tried, I educated, I did my best. We can walk through the consequences of this and it's going to be hard. We'll walk through it together. But just as a parent, having that confidence to know like I did it. I made them aware. I did my best. They still get to make their own choices and live their own lives, but I want to make sure that they're equipped for the situations that might arise.
Yeah, that's so true. Um, well, I appreciate, Brooke, so much your time. I appreciate everything you're doing. Your book is amazing, and your tips are just so practical and simple. And I think, anybody can benefit from them. So thank you so much for the work you're doing and for your time.
Thank you so much, Aniko.